The projector hummed quietly as my presentation crested, its steady rhythm filling the polished conference room. 12 international investors leaned forward in their chairs, eyes fixed on the quarterly growth charts glowing against the screen. These weren't just good numbers, they were transformative, the kind that changed how an entire industry measured possibility. I could see genuine intrigue spreading across their faces as I detailed how our manufacturing process was poised to disrupt the market they thought they already understood. As you can see from these metrics, I said, gesturing toward the rising lines, we've increased operational efficiency by 37% while significantly reducing material waste. This isn't a projection or a theory. These results come directly from the pilot program I personally designed and implemented last year. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Under normal circumstances, I would never have acknowledged it during a moment like this, but we were waiting on final shipping confirmation that these investors needed before moving forward. I murmured a brief apology and glanced down. The words on the screen made my throat constrict. Your position has been eliminated, effective immediately. Please conclude the meeting and clear your desk by 5 p.m., Dominic. My hands went numb. For a split second, the room tilted, the figures on the screen blurring as reality struggled to catch up. 6 months of strange behavior from Dominic suddenly snapped into alignment, like pieces of a puzzle finally forced together. His gradual exclusion of me from strategy sessions, the sudden pointed questions about my process documentation, the casual requests for full access to my client lists, framed as teamwork. I must have faltered longer than I realized because Irina, the lead investor, leaned forward, concern flickering across her face. "Everything all right?" she asked. My phone was still lit in my hand. I saw her eyes flicker downward, registering the message, then lift back to mine. Her expression shifted, sharpening into something alert and calculating. "Is there something we should be aware of?" she asked quietly. The room's energy shifted instantly, excitement drained into uncertainty, curiosity curdling into tension. In that moment, something inside me, something that had been quietly bending under pressure for months, finally snapped cleanly. I placed my phone face up on the conference table. "Actually," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice, "there is something you need to know about this company." I turned back to the screen where my carefully crafted slides still displayed undeniable success. These growth figures are accurate. What isn't included in your information packets is that they were achieved through my pilot program, one built on sustainable materials sourced from local suppliers, not the overseas manufacturers outlined in your proposal. Murmurs rippled around the table. I advanced to a slide that was never meant to be shown today. "These are the true supply chain costs," I continued, pointing to figures dramatically lower than those the investors had been given. "The discrepancy has been systematically redirected over the past year." At that moment, the conference room door slammed open. Dominic stood there, face flushed, breathing hard. "There's been a misunderstanding," he began, but the words landed too late. The investors were already absorbing the implications. "If you're enjoying this story so far, I'd really appreciate your support. Hit like, subscribe for more stories like this, and leave a comment about what you think happens next. This is only the beginning, and you won't want to miss what comes next." My name is Victoria. Until about 40 seconds ago, I was the innovation director at what many considered the most promising manufacturing startup in the Northeast. My friends call me Tori, though very few people earn that familiarity. I've always been cautious with trust, a habit that proved invaluable today. I graduated top of my class in chemical engineering and materials science. While my peers chased prestige roles at massive corporations, I deliberately chose smaller companies where my work could shape direction, not just margins. When Dominic recruited me 2 years ago, he promised exactly that. "We're building something different here," he said during my interview, his green eyes bright with what I believed was authentic conviction. "Sustainability won't be a slogan, it will be our foundation." Those words mirrored everything I believed in. I accepted his offer despite more lucrative opportunities elsewhere. The first year reinforced my choice. I was given autonomy, resources, and recognition as I developed the core manufacturing innovations that became the company's selling point. The shift came quietly, too quietly. It started with Dominic asking me to add his name to my research reports. Just internal documentation, he said, since he oversaw the department. Then came the meetings I was no longer invited to. Budget discussions only, he claimed, nothing related to your work. I noticed subtle changes to my presentation materials before investor briefings. Cost projections adjusted, timelines altered. When I questioned them, Dominic offered a tight smile and said he was making the data more accessible for non-technical audiences. My project was renamed in internal communications. My team members were reassigned one by one. Access to certain servers became temporarily unavailable due to security updates. After 3 months of these incidents, I began documenting everything, quietly. Dates, file changes, conversations that felt wrong, decisions that contradicted our mission. 2 months ago, I overheard the confirmation I'd been dreading. I was working late, the office nearly empty, when voices drifted from the conference room. Through a partially open door, I heard Dominic speaking with Paula, our finance director. "The board loves your innovation strategy," Paula said. Dominic laughed softly. "They should. The sustainability angle is perfect positioning. Victoria is brilliant but naive. She truly believes we're changing the world while making money. That makes her ideal for developing the tech. She doesn't understand the bigger picture. We use her work to attract premium investment, then pivot to traditional manufacturing once we've secured market dominance. The margins are unbeatable. And by the time she realizes, we'll have everything we need from her. Innovation directors are replaceable, especially ones who don't own their intellectual property." I slipped away unnoticed, my mind racing. That night, I reread my contract with brutal clarity. The standard intellectual property clause I'd barely registered now revealed its purpose. Everything I developed belonged to the company, or so Dominic thought. What he didn't know was that during grad school, I'd specialized in intellectual property law alongside engineering, a rare combination shaped by watching a professor's solar technology stolen by a corporate partner. I learned then that contracts have boundaries, and timing is everything. Over the following weeks, I prepared. I documented every alteration to my work, tracked discrepancies between real costs and reported figures, and researched the investors scheduled for today's presentation. Which brings us back to this room, Dominic frozen in the doorway, 12 investors watching us both with growing unease.
"Victoria," Dominic said, forcing calm into his voice, "you're clearly upset about some organizational changes. Let's discuss this privately rather than confusing our guests with incomplete information." "Incomplete information," I repeated softly, an interesting phrase. I faced the investors again. "What Dominic isn't telling you is that the manufacturing process you're considering investing in exists because I developed it against direct company instruction." "That's absurd," Dominic snapped, stepping forward. I raised my hand. "The difference between actual production costs and what you've been shown represents roughly $12 million in unaccounted funds, misreported across multiple quarters." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. A man seated quietly in the corner, who hadn't introduced himself earlier, finally spoke. "These are serious claims." "Victoria," I supplied, "and they're not claims, they're documented facts." Dominic tried to interrupt, insisting I was reacting emotionally to restructuring plans. The man stood. "Actually, Dominic, I think we should hear everything Victoria has to say." Dominic's face drained of color. "And you are?" The man placed his card on the table. "Gregory Lambert, Securities and Exchange Commission, Enforcement Division." Irina cleared her throat. "And I represent the International Trade Commission. We've been monitoring this company for some time." My pulse thundered as Dominic's carefully constructed reality began to collapse. He lunged toward my laptop, but 2 investors blocked him. Don't worry, I said evenly. Everyone here already has the full presentation. Color drained from his face as he realized this meeting was never just a pitch. His confidence unraveled in real time, his career ending before our eyes. This is ridiculous, he stammered, straightening his tie with shaking hands. Victoria misunderstood internal communications. We were restructuring, not eliminating her role. Gregory remained standing. Perhaps we should continue with legal counsel present. Absolutely, Dominic said too quickly. Let's reschedule after we clear this up. Irina shook her head. I think we've seen enough for immediate action. She turned to me. You mentioned discrepancies in supply chain reporting. Can you elaborate? I nodded and advanced to the next slide, one Dominic had never seen. This chart compares real material costs from local suppliers with what was reported to the board and investors. Silence pressed down as the figures appeared. The green bars show verified costs supported by original invoices. The blue bars reflect reported expenses. There's a consistent 35% inflation across every category. Gregory opened his notebook. And where did the excess go? At first, I couldn't trace it, I said, but 3 weeks ago I found something interesting. I clicked again, revealing a bank statement. This account was opened 6 months ago under a shell company called Helios Manufacturing. The registered address matches a property Dominic purchased last year. This is outrageous, Dominic shouted, his composure finally shattering. You hacked private accounts. That's illegal. Actually, I replied calmly, I received this statement by accident. It was misdirected to my email instead of Kala's, because our company addresses differ by a single letter. I simply opened an attachment sent to me. Gregory lifted an eyebrow toward Dominic. Is Paula your finance director? Dominic's silence answered for him. Victoria, Gregory asked, when did you first suspect financial irregularities? I took a steady breath, aware that every word would be scrutinized in the investigation that followed. 4 months ago, I noticed discrepancies between my original budget proposals and the final versions presented to clients. When I raised concerns, I was told it was standard markup, which would be normal business practice. Dominic interrupted desperately. Except, I continued, the markup wasn't reported as profit. It was listed as production costs, artificially inflating expenses while creating an untraceable slush fund. The conference room door opened again. A security guard stepped in, visibly uneasy. Mr. Dominic asked me to escort Miss Victoria from the building, he said hesitantly. Gregory turned to him. I'm with the Securities and Exchange Commission conducting an inquiry. Miss Victoria will be staying. The guard's eyes widened. He nodded quickly and backed out. Dominic's breathing grew shallow and erratic. This is a setup. She planned this. Yes, I interrupted. I did plan this, just like you planned to steal my work, take credit for my innovations, and discard me once you'd extracted everything valuable. I turned to the investors. 2 months ago, I discovered Dominic had filed patent applications for my technologies, listing himself as the primary inventor and me as a minor contributor. The filing dates were backdated to precede my employment. One of the investors, a silver-haired woman who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. I'm Eleanor with Brightline Capital. We were considering a significant investment in your company specifically because of these innovations. She turned slowly toward Dominic. Were you aware that Victoria had already filed provisional patents 9 months ago as part of her graduate work? Dominic's expression shifted from panic to confusion. That's impossible. Our legal team verified. Your legal team verified what you told them, I clarified. The foundational work for these processes was documented in my thesis. I filed provisionals before joining the company. That's why I was comfortable signing your employment agreement. The core intellectual property was already protected. The room erupted in murmurs. Dominic lunged toward me, but 2 men intercepted him. You think you've won? He hissed, his charming facade completely gone. You have no idea who you're dealing with. The board will never believe you over me. They won't have to, Gregory stated flatly. The evidence speaks for itself. As security escorted Dominic out, a strange hollowness replaced the adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation. Years of work, countless late nights, all the passion I'd poured into these innovations, nearly stolen with a single text message. The meeting dissolved into controlled chaos as Gregory began collecting statements and contact information. Irina pulled me aside. That took extraordinary courage, but this is only the beginning of a complicated process. Are you prepared for what comes next? I nodded, though truthfully I had no idea what awaited me. I couldn't let him take everything. Whistleblowers often pay a steep price, especially when exposing someone as well-connected as Dominic. Her words sent a chill through me. Well-connected? I thought he was simply ambitious. Irina's expression darkened. Dominic didn't build this company alone. He has powerful partners who won't appreciate this public embarrassment. As the investors filed out, I gathered my materials, my thoughts racing. The victory I'd imagined suddenly felt incomplete, even dangerous. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Every sound outside my apartment made me tense. Dominic's final words echoed in my mind. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." I reviewed my options until dawn. By morning, I'd made a decision. I couldn't undo what I'd started, but I could prepare for what came next. I called my former graduate advisor, Professor Lin, who had warned me about Dominic when I first mentioned his offer. "You were right about him," I admitted. "I wish I hadn't been. Where are you now?" "My apartment, but I don't think I should stay here. Come to the university, my office, 1 hour." Professor Lin had spent 20 years in industry before academia. She'd seen brilliance stolen, credit erased, innovations buried to protect existing products.
When I arrived, she was already making calls. "Victoria needs protection," she said into the phone. "Not just legal, actual protection." After a pause, she added, "Because Dominic Vega doesn't operate alone. He's the charming face for investors, but Archer pulls his strings." My blood ran cold. Archer? As in Hudson Archer? Hudson Archer was legendary, a pioneer who reshaped manufacturing in the 1990s before expanding into technology, energy, and private equity. His name was etched onto university buildings. His foundation funded research worldwide. Professor Lin ended the call and faced me. "You've stepped into something far bigger than a dishonest boss." Dominic was installed as CEO for his charisma and technical background. Archer Capital provides the money and connections that make everything possible. But why would someone like Hudson Archer need to steal my work? Because what you've developed threatens his existing investments. Your manufacturing process makes half his portfolio obsolete. It's more profitable to control your innovation than compete with it. I sank into a chair as the weight of it finally hit me. What do I do now? Professor Lin's expression softened. "What you've always done. Be smarter than they expect." Over the next week, I moved between temporary places, never staying anywhere longer than a night. News of the investigations surfaced in industry publications, though my name remained absent. Dominic was placed on administrative leave pending internal review. Then the board called for an emergency meeting. Through my newly hired attorney, I agreed to meet at a neutral location. The temporary conference room felt sterile and tense as 5 board members entered. I recognized only 2, Paul Winters, the chairman, and Teresa Gale, head of the finance committee. Their faces were unreadable as they took their seats across from me and my attorney. Paul spoke first. "Miss Victoria, we want to thank you for bringing these issues to light. The board takes allegations of financial impropriety very seriously." I nodded but stayed silent. "However," he continued, "we're concerned about how this information was disclosed. Involving external parties in a sensitive internal matter has created significant complications." My attorney, Elena, responded before I could. "My client attempted to raise these concerns internally for months. She was consistently ignored and ultimately terminated for doing so." "There's no record of any formal complaints," Teresa countered. I opened my laptop. "I've brought copies of 17 emails sent to leadership over the past 6 months, each flagging discrepancies in financial reporting or raising concerns about intellectual property protection." "We never received these," Paul insisted. "Perhaps because Dominic maintained exclusive control over board communications," I said. "But I anticipated that possibility, which is why every email was blind copied to my personal account and timestamped." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. "What exactly do you want, Victoria?" Teresa finally asked.
I want what I've always wanted, to see my work used to create sustainable manufacturing practices that benefit everyone, not just wealthy shareholders. Paul leaned forward. Let me be direct. The company is prepared to offer you a generous settlement paired with a non-disclosure agreement. You'd be compensated for any inconvenience while allowing us to handle this discreetly. Elena smiled thinly. My client has no interest in being silenced. The alternative could be unpleasant for everyone, Teresa warned. Lengthy litigation drains resources and damages reputations, often for all parties involved. Is that a threat? I asked quietly. It's reality, Paul replied. We have significant resources and an obligation to protect the company's interests. I closed my laptop. So do I. As we stood to leave, Paul made one final attempt. Victoria, you should know Hudson Archer has taken a personal interest in resolving this situation. He suggested meeting with you directly. The mention of his name was meant to intimidate me. Instead, it confirmed everything Professor Lin had warned me about. Hudson Archer wouldn't involve himself in a minor dispute unless he had real skin in the game. I'll consider it, I replied evenly. Outside the building, Elena gripped my arm. Be careful meeting Archer. Men like him don't reach that level of power by playing fair. I know, I told her, but sometimes you have to step closer to danger before you can neutralize it. That evening, my phone rang from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. A smooth, measured voice spoke. Miss Victoria, Hudson Archer here. I believe we should talk. My pulse quickened. This was the man who controlled billion-dollar industries, whose name appeared on buildings and headlines alike, now calling me directly. I appreciate you reaching out, I said carefully, though I am surprised the chairman of Archer Capital gets involved in operational disputes at portfolio companies. A low chuckle came through the line. When something threatens multiple investments at once, I make exceptions. His tone was casual, as if we were discussing the weather rather than my future. Would you be willing to meet tomorrow? My private office downtown. Every instinct screamed danger, yet refusing wasn't an option if I wanted to understand what I was truly facing. I'll be there, I agreed, with my attorney. That won't be necessary, Archer replied smoothly, just a friendly conversation between colleagues. Nevertheless, she'll be joining me. A brief pause. As you wish. 3 tomorrow. My assistant will text you the address. After the call ended, I immediately rang Elena and Professor Lin, putting them on a conference call to plan. He's trying to intimidate you, Elena warned. Men like Archer believe their reputation alone will make you fold. Professor Lin was blunter. He'll offer you everything you think you want, then take twice as much in return. What choice do I have? I asked. If I refuse, he'll find other ways to apply pressure. You always have choices, Victoria, Professor Lin said, but you need leverage, something he values more than silencing you. I stared out at the city lights, thinking about what Hudson Archer valued most. His reputation, his empire. Then it struck me. His legacy. I whispered it aloud. Hudson Archer is 73 years old. He spent decades giving commencement speeches about innovation and progress. What if the final chapter of his story is stealing ideas and crushing real innovation just to protect outdated investments? Elena understood instantly. Public perception. That's the one thing someone like him can't buy outright. Exactly, I said as my thoughts snapped into focus, and I knew how to approach the meeting. I spent the night researching Hudson Archer, his companies, his public statements, his philanthropy. By morning, I had a sharper sense of who he was and what might sway him. The address his assistant sent led to an understated building in the financial district. No company name on the entrance, just a simple A etched into glass doors. Security checked my ID and escorted us to a private elevator, handing over a keycard. Elena squeezed my arm as we rose. Remember, we walk if anything feels off. Your safety matters more than the outcome. The doors opened to a minimalist reception area with sweeping city views. A composed woman greeted us.
Miss Victoria, Miss Elena, Mr. Archer is expecting you. She led us into a spacious office where Hudson Archer stood to greet us. In person, he carried more authority than his photos suggested. Tall, lean, piercing gray eyes, a simple charcoal suit that likely cost more than my yearly salary. Victoria, he said, offering his hand like we were old acquaintances. Thank you for coming. I shook it firmly. Mr. Archer? Hudson, please. He gestured towards seats by the windows. Coffee? Water? We declined. The hospitality felt calculated, a subtle power move. I've followed your career with interest, he said once seated. Your graduate work showed remarkable promise. I raised an eyebrow. My graduate work hardly seemed visible to someone like you. A faint smile. I fund sustainable manufacturing research at 17 universities. Promising innovations don't escape my attention. He leaned forward. Which is why Dominic's behavior is particularly disappointing. I knew nothing of his financial misconduct. Yet you're intervening now, Elena noted. Archer nodded. Because Victoria's work is too valuable to lose to lawsuits and headlines. What Dominic attempted was wrong, full stop. The admission caught me off guard. So what do you propose? I asked. A clean slate. I'll ensure you receive full credit. Leadership will be restructured. Your patents remain yours with an exclusive licensing agreement that compensates you fairly. He named a number that made me pause. You'll also have complete autonomy over the sustainable manufacturing division. It was everything I should have wanted. Recognition, control, resources. And in return, I asked, discretion regarding the investigation. We resolve this internally, without further regulatory involvement. Elena shifted. You're asking her to potentially obstruct a federal inquiry. Archer shook his head. I'm asking her to state her concerns have been addressed. Agencies can redirect their limited resources. I studied him. Why does this matter to you personally? This is more than protecting a portfolio company. For the first time, a crack showed. Something like fear flickered. Your process isn't just innovative, Victoria. It's revolutionary. It renders traditional methods obsolete almost overnight. He gestured at the skyline. I have investments in 14 manufacturers that would collapse if this spreads too fast. So it's about protecting your assets, I said. Controlled transition, he corrected. Sudden disruption destroys jobs, communities. I'm proposing managed change. It sounded reasonable until I recalled my research. An interesting stance from someone who built his fortune by dismantling the steel industry in the 90s, closing 3 major firms in 18 months. His expression tightened. I've learned from mistakes. Or you're shielding yourself now that you're on the other side, I countered. The air cooled. Archer leaned back, reassessing me. What do you want, Victoria, beyond my offer? Transparency, I said without hesitation. No shell companies, no hidden ownership, full disclosure to investors about how my technology works and what it means for existing manufacturing. He considered it. That would force market corrections. Yes, it would. I'd need time to reposition certain holdings first, Elena cut in. That sounds like insider trading. Archer smiled thinly. I'm simply being practical. So am I said, reaching into my bag. I pulled out a slim folder and placed it on the table. Inside was evidence that Archer Capital had actively suppressed similar innovations from at least 3 other researchers over the past decade. Each case followed the same pattern, promising technology acquired through a subsidiary, then mysteriously shelved or restricted through exclusive patents. His face remained calm, but his fingers tightened slightly on the armrest. Where did you get this information? Professor Lin has tracked buried innovations for years. After Dominic's actions raised red flags, she connected the dots. For several long moments, Archer said nothing. Then, surprisingly, he smiled, a genuine expression that softened his severe features. Claudia Lin. I should have known she'd be involved. He shook his head.
We were research partners 40 years ago, before taking different paths. Different ethics, you mean, I corrected. Different perspectives on progress, he said. Claudia believes in radical transparency, regardless of consequences. I believe in measured transitions. He tapped the folder. This information could damage more than just me, Victoria. Thousands of jobs depend on stable markets. I'm not looking to create chaos, I assured him, just to ensure my work isn't buried like theirs. The negotiation nearly 3 hours. Elena proved invaluable, catching subtle loopholes in Archer's proposed terms. By the time we reached a tentative agreement, the sun was setting over the city. Archer extended his hand again. I underestimated you, Victoria. That won't happen again. I certainly hope not, I replied, shaking firmly. As Elena and I rode the elevator down, she whispered, "Did we just negotiate with the devil?" We negotiated with a businessman who forgot that innovation can't be controlled forever, I said, and we got what we needed. The following weeks passed in a blur of legal documents, restructuring announcements, and carefully worded press releases. Dominic resigned to pursue other opportunities. The board appointed an interim CEO with a strong ethical reputation. Most importantly, my patents remained mine with a licensing agreement maintaining my control over implementation. What no one except Elena and Professor Lin knew was that our agreement with Archer contained a hidden safeguard. If my technology was restricted or its rollout delayed beyond specific benchmarks, a trust would automatically release all of Professor Lin's research on buried innovations to select journalists and regulatory agencies. 6 months later, I stood on a manufacturing floor watching workers implement my process at full scale. A news crew filmed a feature on sustainable industrial innovations. The reporter turned to me. "Your technology is being called revolutionary. Did you expect this level of impact when you developed it?" I smiled, thinking of the path that led here. I always believed in its potential. I'm just grateful it found the right home for proper implementation. What I didn't say was that the right home emerged only after Hudson Archer reorganized his holdings, divesting from companies that couldn't adapt and investing heavily in those that could. The market adjustment was gradual enough to avoid chaos, yet decisive enough to create real change. That text message, the one that had shattered my world in the conference room, ultimately forced a reckoning that made my innovations stronger. Dominic had tried to eliminate me, unaware that by pushing me to the edge, he had ensured his own downfall. That evening, an unexpected email arrived from Hudson Archer. "Victoria, watched your interview today. The Western plant exceeded efficiency projections by 23%. You were right about the implementation timeline. Sometimes old dogs can learn new approaches. If you're interested in discussing the next phase, my door remains open." "Huh," I smiled as I typed my reply. "Glad to hear about the Western plant. Happy to discuss next steps. This time, I'll bring the coffee." Victoria, my revenge wasn't destroying careers or companies. It was ensuring that innovation couldn't be buried, that truth couldn't be silenced with a single text. By standing my ground against both Dominic and Hudson Archer, I had not only protected my work, but potentially changed how an entire industry approached progress. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't tearing someone down, it's building something so valuable they have no choice but to acknowledge your worth. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more authentic stories of resilience and determination. Have you ever stood your ground when someone tried to claim your work? Share your experience in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else facing similar challenges. Remember, sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is refuse to be silenced.